Hey friends, welcome back to Sweet as Honey. It's been a little while. I appreciate your patience on that. I want to pick up where we left. Last video, you may have to go back and rewatch. We look at the first 5 verses of John chapter 1. And we did that kind of in dialogue or conversation with Genesis 1 through 3 from the end of last year. And I want to just kind of pick that up again. I think there's still some overlap here. You remember we talked about how John introduces, John the writer introduces Jesus as the Word. In the beginning was the Word. And he carries on with that kind of amazing, kind of really rich introduction of the Word and who he is as the beginning, as the source of all life, the source of all being, and the source of all light. The very next section opens up with our story today. So let me just share it with you. Let's talk about it briefly. It's a true story. It comes from God's Word, and it goes like this. There came a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify about the light, so that all might believe. He was not the light, but he came as a witness to the light. And that's the end of the story. That's all it is. You're kind of like, surely there has to be something more. But that's what's there. Now, if the first 5 verses are kind of helping us understand Jesus's identity as the Word, then it's very curious so quickly we're introduced to another identity. And I want to suggest there's all kinds of treasure here as we learn about this character, John. Now, again, we find out just later in the chapter, this is John the Baptist, not John the gospel writer. It's easy to get those confused. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. Now, the first thing that just jumps out at me is we find out that here is a man sent. Which you say, well, yeah, sure. What's the problem? There's no problem. But what I'm intrigued by is that we talked about all the way back in Genesis 3, there was another kind of sending. Remember when God sent the man and the woman out of the garden. And we have the first sending was the consequence of their disobedience, the consequence of their idolatry. And now what we have is a different sort of sending. It's almost like God is sending again, but this time it is for the purposes of redemption and salvation. And I wonder if that's significant, particularly when we think about missions or we think about the Christian faith. How well developed is our theology of sentness? Because I think all this is preparing the way. John is a foretaste of an even greater sending. God sent John to get the world ready for God's sending of his son, Jesus. John's the foretaste, the precursor to get ready for Jesus' being sent into the world. So where Adam and Eve were sent out of the garden, John's preparing the way for Jesus to be sent into the world to bring about redemption for the choices that the descendants of Adam and Eve have made. Men and women, that's amazing. I don't know quite what to do with all that, but I love that. Notice then we get his name. There was a man named John. This isn't just some random guy. This isn't some random human person. This is an individual who has a name. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. And again, this takes us all the way back to Genesis, or maybe a little later than what we have looked at together. But remember in chapter 12, where God shows up and says, let me tell you how I'm going to begin the salvation project of the entire world. I want to introduce you to my friend Abram. There was a man named Abram. Here we find there was a man named John. God has a heart for the whole world, but he has a relationship with particular individuals, the likes of Abraham, the likes of John, the likes of Billy, and you. And he's looking for individuals who want to be a part of a wider community, who are coming together to be the people of God, not just so that they can experience salvation themselves, but that so that they can share salvation, share the light and the life with those among whom they are sent. Notice again, I think we're suddenly dealing with a theology of sentness that raises questions for all of us. But it's not just for the church, it's for the likes of me. I'm being named. You're being named in some way. God cares about the individual. There was a man named Abram. There was a man named John. There is a man named Billy. There's a woman named, and you fill in the blank. Whatever our names are, God knows us by name. And he's sending us. There's a purposefulness to our existence. Now it goes on, because then we find out, we don't just know his name, we know where he's from, his origin. Notice his origin. I think that's so interesting. Ties right back into Genesis. But then we get his job. He's got a role. Oh, good. What's he going to do? He's coming as a church planter. I bet you he's going to be a church planter. We need lots more churches, don't you think? He's going to be a Christian businessman, don't you think? Christian businessmen, we need more of those. We need more of those. He's a godly father. I'm sure that's what God wants him to do, be a godly father. All those things are good. All those things are needed. But it's interesting. What do we find out about John? John is introduced. He came as a witness to testify about the light so that all might believe through him. You say, well, hang on. A witness? What do you mean by a witness? What is a witness? Well, in a legal context, a witness is somebody who gives an account of something. Perhaps maybe they were at an incident of some kind and they saw what happened. And so they're a witness. They're telling what happened at the scene. Or perhaps they know somebody who they know either the defendant or the accused, and so they're giving testimony on behalf of or against, saying, I know this to be true about, or I have experienced this with that kind of, that's a witness. Somebody who gives an account, tells what has happened. What you think? Well, hang on. If a witness is somebody who gives an account, tells what has happened, you just mean like they're telling the story of what unfolded. Yeah, that's exactly right. I want to suggest to you a witness is a storyteller. A witness is a storyteller. Somebody who testifies, this is what I saw. This is what I know to be true. This is what I have experienced. A witness is somebody who tells their story of what has happened. And I love that because it's so clear. He came as a witness to testify about the light. He's not testifying about himself. He's not testifying about somebody else. He's testifying about the light. And as we saw in those first 5 verses, the light is the life. And the life is the Word. In the Word is all being, all life, and all light. So John comes and his role's real clear. His job is to tell the story, to testify of what he's experienced of the light. I love at the end, it makes it real clear he was not the light. Which I just think I think this is such a gift. God's not asking John the Baptist to be the light. That's not his role. He comes as a witness to testify about the light. Now, what do we do with all that? I wonder if those first 5 verses are trying to help us understand the second person of the Trinity, God the Son, Jesus Christ's identity as the Word. And I wonder if real quickly we're getting introduced to the identity of John the Baptist. And this raises questions for us and our own identities. What would it look like for us to be sent? Not as some random churchgoer, not as even some random Christian, but in what ways is God calling you by name? He's saying to you, I want you to be the one to go and do this. I want you to be the one to speak to this person. I want you to, and he's sending you in some capacity. Maybe it's to a spouse. Maybe it's to your children or grandchildren. Maybe it's to your community, your neighbors. Maybe it's to your work colleagues or those you relate with online. Maybe God is sending you from one community to another community. I don't know, but in what ways is God sending us, just like he sent John? Now, for some of us, that kind of sounds exciting. For others of us, it strikes fear in our hearts. Oh, God, don't send me. I could never do that. God, don't ask me. God, I'm not ready. I'm not smart enough. I don't know the language. We could go right down all the excuses. But it's interesting. God doesn't lightly assign his sending. And what I mean by that is he calls John by name. He knows him intimately and well. And he's very conscious of what John is capable of and what he's not. He knows his strengths and his limitations, just like he knows yours and mine. So if he's sending you somewhere, it's not because he's wanting to see you fail. It's not because he's wanting to we'll see how she does. Well, maybe they'll get it this time. There's none of that in God. He is specifically sending you because you're the one that can give witness in that context to him. I can't. My neighbor can't. But if he's sending you, you're the one that can speak into that context in a way that none of the rest of us can. There's a particularity to the sending of God that I think oftentimes gets overlooked. He's calling everyone. He wants to send everyone, but he's not sending everyone in the same way. He's calling you by name, and he's sending you in a particular way to a particular group of people, to have a particular platform. To do what? To give your witness. And that may mean you become a Bible storyteller. I hope so. It may mean that you preach and teach the Bible and give up everything else, and that's your full-time job. Maybe. Or it may be he's just saying, I want you to be a light. No, I want you to be a witness to the light. I want you to be a witness to the light. Tell your story of how he's made a difference in your life. Tell the story of how he's making a difference in your family, what he's done for you, and what he can do for the people in your context. I wonder if God, through the gospel writer John, is introducing us to John the Baptist's story as a picture of what God's wanting to do. He sent John the Baptist. He sent Jesus. Now he wants to send us in that same way so that we can be witnesses, storytellers, if you will, to give a testimony about what the light has done in our hearts and lives. He's not asking you to be the light. He's not asking me to be the light. Salvation's not in me, it's not in you. But I wonder if today he might be saddling up alongside us and saying, would you be willing to be a witness in this context, in this relationship? This is where I need your voice. To me is the word, to me is the light, and to me is the life. And we can do that. He can help us. You can do that. What you're doing matters. Appreciate all that you're doing for the kingdom. May God bless you.